let's imagine a planet that sustains life. A day here lasts about 22 Earth hours. It has a moon-like satellite, but it's much closer. A vast ocean covers almost the entire planet, with just a small amount of land, around 15%, mostly concentrated in a single massive continent. And this planet is deadly. Living on land here is far more dangerous than in the ocean, because almost everything that walks, runs, and flies wants to kill and devour you. Do you think this sounds like science fiction? No, this is actually our Earth, literally, just 250 million years ago, during the so-called Lopingian Epoch, long before dinosaurs appeared. What fearsome creatures lurked at the water's edge? Who dominated the skies? And which apex predator was at the top of the food chain? Join us as we travel back to an era when Earth was a planet of death. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to see more fascinating content. To say the world was harsh 250 million years ago would be an understatement. Take a look at this. It seems like a water planet with no land, but this is what our familiar Pacific Ocean looks like today. Now, imagine that the ancient superocean, Panthalassa, was almost twice as big. And in the middle of this vast planetary ocean lay just one supercontinent, Pangaea. But if you found yourself in this terrifying era on our planet, you would most likely prefer to be not on land, but in the ocean. Surprisingly, your chances of survival would be higher there. The supercontinent itself seems lifeless. Deserts, rocky mountain ranges, and scorching heat dominate its interior, making it nearly impossible for life to take hold. Forests, meadows, no. For the most part, only barren, scorching expanses. The intense heat scorched the land, creating a truly deadly climate on the continent. Imagine average temperatures higher than the hottest months in the Sahara Desert. And it wouldn't just be the heat making it hard to breathe, but also the low oxygen concentration in the air. Over 50 million years have passed since the lush late Carboniferous period with its 30% oxygen levels, and now oxygen has plummeted to just 15%. That's even less than the 21% found in our atmosphere today. This climate and landscape left little chance for those who couldn't adapt to the constant struggle for survival, but those who did became true monsters. You might say, come on, what could be scarier than toothed sea sharks and Lovecraftian beasts? Alright, let's dive into the ocean of that time and see what was lurking beneath the waves. The predators that ruled the giant planetary ocean before the start of the Lopingian Epoch were so terrifying that the mere sight of them would leave you paralyzed. Take a look at this. This is a helicoprion, a monster with a jaw completely covered in teeth spiraled into a horrific saw-like formation. It was up to 8 meters long. It looked like a nightmare, and this is what it actually was for its prey. It's hard to believe that something like this actually existed. However, by the Lopingian Epoch, this beast had already gone extinct, leaving behind far less terrifying relatives. One such descendant was Helicampodus, a predator that grew up to 2 meters long. It was about the size of a modern leopard shark, not exactly comforting, but still incomparable to its monstrous ancestor. Most notably, Helicampodus's teeth were adapted exclusively to soft prey, like squid, with no trace of the helicoprion's once deadly and formidable jaw. Helicampodus was a puppy compared to the giant helicoprion. Yes, there were still shark-like fish, but they were even smaller than Helicampodus, usually no longer than 1 meter. And that's about it. The rest of the oceanic creatures of the time would likely pose no threat to you at all. Let's take a closer look at these creatures. By the Lopingian epoch, trilobites, once the dominant life forms in the Paleozoic seas, were living out their final days. These ancient arthropods, which first appeared around 520 million years ago, had thrived for millions of years. However, by the Lopingian epoch, most species had already gone extinct, and the remaining specimens were rare. They had become tiny, less than an inch long. In contrast, their ancestors could reach up to 90 centimeters. Ammonites faced a similar fate. During the Lopingian epoch, they were among the last groups of mollusks clinging to life. At that time, their shells rarely exceeded 10 to 15 centimeters in diameter. And yet, these creatures were once formidable predators, with some species reaching up to 2 meters in size. Yes, there were also sea scorpions, and they too were on the brink of extinction. Take, for example, the Hibbertopteridae, the last known representatives of what was once a powerful group of sea scorpions. Despite being near extinction, their size was still impressive. They could grow up to 1 meter long. Imagine a scorpion the size of a dog. You've probably already started to wonder, why did the ocean look so strange? Where did everyone go? The primary cause was the so-called Capetanian mass extinction event. This was just a precursor to the Great Permian extinction at the end of the period. But even so, it dealt a significant blow to marine ecosystems. The underwater world lost about a third of its inhabitants. Land ecosystems were also affected, but not to the same extent and in a different way. To survive on land, creatures already had to be truly badass from the start. And now, we arrive at the most fascinating part. Even at the boundary between water and land, life on ancient Earth had already become terrifying. How did we see modern frogs? Sure, we may have heard that some can be poisonous, but would a frog ever try or even want to eat us? Of course not. However, frogs are fierce predators. Some species hunt not only insects, but anything smaller than themselves. A frog of this type can easily swallow a large mouse or even a whole rat. Now, let us introduce you to their close relatives who lived during this terrifying period. How do you like this creature? Doesn't look much like a frog, does it? This is a Melosaurus. These beasts could grow up to 3 meters or more. Armed with rows of sharp teeth and a distinctly predatory mindset, Melosaurs were the rulers of their domain. They lived near the water's edge, much like modern crocodiles. They would lie motionless at the waterline, nearly invisible thanks to their camouflaged skin. Their hunting method was one of silence and stealth. Their prey wouldn't notice them until it was too late. The moment a Melosaurus spotted suitable prey, whether it was a small reptile coming to drink or another unsuspecting amphibian, it used its powerful limbs and tail to launch a sudden explosive attack. Lined with sharp teeth, the jaws of this ancient predator would clamp down with immense force, piercing the flesh of its victim. The strength of the jaws was enough to hold the prey, preventing any escape. Melosaurs hunted using a grab-and-hold tactic. Once they had their prey in their jaws, they wouldn't release it until it stopped struggling. These predators of the Lopingian period were the true masters of coastal zones and small bodies of water. Their arsenal included not just raw power and endurance, but also cold, calculated patience. With such tactics and size, Melosaurs could easily take down anything careless enough to approach the water. For many of their victims, there was simply no choice. Dying of thirst wasn't an option either. Do you think Melosaurus was the scariest amphibian of the time? Not quite. There was another monster that could outsize even the Melosaur. Oranocentrodon was an ancient predator that could grow up to 4 meters in length. Though still an amphibian, it was much better adapted to life on land than Melosaurus, and it looked even more terrifying. This massive amphibian was a cold-blooded killer, perfectly suited for hunting both in water and on land. Like Melosaurus, it had an uncanny patience and always knew when to strike. With a sturdy body, short but powerful limbs, a long muscular tail, and a wide jaw, Uranosentrodon was equally adapted to land and water. These traits solidified its dominance in its ecological niche. If its prey was trying to escape by land, Uranosentrodon would follow without losing much speed. Its short but strong legs, equipped with sharp claws, allowed it to easily grip uneven surfaces. Once it had its victim in its powerful jaws, there was no escape. It's believed that Uranosentrodon's favored hunting method was drowning. After seizing its prey at the water's edge or in shallow waters, it would drag the poor thing underwater. This tactic is often used by modern crocodiles. However, it's important to remember that Uranosentrodon was not a reptile, but an amphibian, a sort of salamander on steroids. By the way, even today, the largest amphibian in the world is the Chinese giant salamander, which can grow up to 1.2 meters in length. But compared to Uranosentrodon, it would look like a tiny worm. As terrifying as these two beasts of the Lopingian epoch were, even more fearsome predators roamed the land during this dark time. They were the merciless killers of their era, occupying the top of the bloody food chain. First, let us briefly introduce you to these creatures. We're talking about Gorgonopsids. The very name of this group of species sounds like a warning. Gorgonos translates from ancient Greek as dreadful or terrifying. Gorgonopsids looked like a mix between a lizard and a mammal. Long, curved, saber-like fangs, visible even when their mouths were closed, powerful limbs, and long muscular bodies. All of these features pointed to strength, speed, and ruthlessness. Gorgonopsids were the most dangerous creatures of their time. Their enormous fangs could easily tear apart large herbivores, while their strong jaws and wide mouths provided a firm grip that was impossible to escape. These creatures lived long before even the earliest dinosaurs emerged, let alone mammals. Now, let's take a closer look at the most fearsome among them. Based on their size, biological traits, and hunting adaptations, we'll rank them in ascending order in terms of overall deadliness. Pravoslavlevia was a small yet deadly Gorgonopsid that lived in what is now modern-day Russia. Although this predator didn't exceed 2 meters, 6.5 feet in length, making it seem less threatening compared to its larger relatives. Don't be deceived by its size. In a world where predators lurked at every turn, even relatively small creatures had to become masters of their bloody craft. And Pravoslavlevia was just that, a fast, agile, and deadly killer. For this, we have awarded it an honorable 4th place on our list. Imagine it lying in an ambush, waiting patiently in the shadows of rocks or sparse vegetation. Unlike larger predators, Pravoslavlevia relied on surprise and the speed of its attack. Its long saber-like teeth were perfectly designed to pierce its prey like daggers, while its short, powerful legs were made for instant attack. Its strategy was to strike fast and without delay before the prey could even realize what was happening. Pravoslavlevia mainly preyed on small reptiles and early mammalian ancestors. In 3rd place, we have Sukhogorgon, another predator that lived in what is now modern Russia. The average size of Sukhogorgon was about 2 meters, 6.5 feet, making it larger and more dangerous than Pravoslavlevia. Despite being larger, it retained the same advantages: speed and agility. The most fascinating feature of these creatures was how they heard. At the back of their lower jaw, they had a unique auditory organ, a large tissue-like eardrum. Sound vibrations were picked up by the jaw and transmitted to the inner ear. Sukhogorgons could only hear with their mouths open when their quadrate bone made contact with the auditory bone. When their mouths were closed, they were essentially deaf. They were probably able to perceive sounds within a narrow frequency range, possibly playing a social role. Sukhogorgon might have used sound signals to locate mates and defend their territory. Interestingly, this creature led a predominantly aquatic lifestyle despite being terrestrial. Most likely, they had poor thermoregulation and used water to cool down. Zucogorgon probably fed on a wide variety of prey, including small reptiles, amphibians, and possibly insects. But even this formidable predator had a bigger and scarier competitor. Meet Rubigia atrox, who once roamed the lands of present-day South Africa and Tanzania. We're awarding it a second place on our list, and this beast is truly worth a closer look. Rubigia atrox was up to 3 meters, 10 feet long, and weighed over 500 kilograms, 1,102 pounds. With such size and bulk, it had no need to hide, and it didn't. This was true for other Gorgonopsids as well, but especially for this one. There have been many attempts to reconstruct this monster, and all of them evoke an unsettling sense of dread. Even in illustrations, Rubigia looks terrifying, largely due to its elusive resemblance to both reptiles and saber-toothed cats. Specifically, Rubigia atrox also looks like a mutant pit bull from a horror movie. This hunter didn't need to torment its prey for long. A single bite from its fangs was often enough to cause it to bleed out quickly. Rubigia preyed on large animals such as periosaurs, dicynodonts, and other creatures of its time. With all this in mind, it's hard to imagine who could take the top spot on our list of deadliest predators. And now, meet Inostrancevia, another beast whose remains were discovered in modern-day Russia. This creature represents the pinnacle of Gorgonopsid evolution, a true nightmare for any herbivore foolish enough to venture into open spaces. With a body length of up to 3.5 meters, 11.5 feet, and a weight exceeding 500 kilograms, 1,102 pounds, Inostrancevia was the largest, most dangerous, and most ferocious predator of its time. Based on its anatomy, it likely hunted large prey such as periosaurs and other herbivores that roamed the Permian landscape. Using its long fangs, it inflicted deep wounds that caused its prey to quickly bleed out. Like other Gorgonopsids, Inostrancevia relied on its deadly canines, but what set it apart was its sheer size. Inostrancevia had a few smaller caniniform teeth, up to 5 pairs on the upper jaw, and none on the lower jaw. Its entire biting force was concentrated in the front, in its massive fangs and large incisors. An interesting feature of this predator was the maxillary bones loosely connected with its skull. This allowed for more efficient bites. Judging by the large number of individually found fangs, its upper teeth were frequently replaced. New fangs would grow behind the old ones as they were lost. So even the loss of its fearsome fangs was no problem for this monster. It easily grew new ones. These were the creatures that reigned supreme in those harsh times, and believe me, you would freeze in terror not only at the sight of Gorgonopsids, but even their prey, the herbivores of that era. Even today, seemingly peaceful animals like cows can seriously injure or kill a person. There's no global statistic, but for example, The Guardian, citing the British Health and Safety Executive, reported that cows killed 98 people in Great Britain alone between 2000 and 2020. What kind of herbivores, then, could have existed in that terrifying Lopingian epoch? Now, let's meet a couple of the most striking species. Lystrosaurus was a relatively small but incredibly resilient and adaptable herbivore. However, calling it small might be misleading. It could grow up to 2 meters or even more in length. And this creature looked quite terrifying. With its strong, almost barrel-shaped body, short, powerful limbs, and a rather intimidating face with 2 tusks, Lystrosaurus was a natural-born digger. Its upper jaw was structured in such a way that it could be used almost like a shovel. Lystrosaurus had no trouble digging up tasty roots and tubers from the dry ground. It wasn't picky about its diet and was ready to eat whatever was available, which helped it survive in an environment where food was a true luxury. This tireless burrower wasn't just tenacious, it was also incredibly prolific. Its population grew so extensively that Lystrosaurus became one of the most widespread animals of its time, inhabiting nearly every accessible corner of the land. But again, Lystrosaurus wasn't the largest herbivore around, so who held the size records? Scutosaurus was a vegetarian that resembled a tank, designed by nature to survive in a world full of predators. It would grow up to 3 meters, 10 feet in length, and weigh up to 500 kilograms, 1,102 pounds. Scutosaurus looked like a cross between a modern turtle and an armadillo, but without a shell. Instead, it was equipped with powerful bony armor embedded directly in its skin. This giant had strong legs and a muscular body. Scutosaurus was likely slow and cumbersome, but it wasn't concerned with speed and maneuvers. All it needed was reliable protection, and nature delivered by providing it with bony armor-like plates that covered its back and sides. Scutosaurus was tough prey even for the top predators. So far, we've explored what swam, walked, and crawled during that distant time. But what about flying creatures? So what could fly back then? Only insects. Pterosaurs were still far in the future, not to mention birds. During the Lopingian Epoch, large insects were no longer as monstrous as they had been in the Carboniferous period when the atmosphere had a high oxygen content that fueled their enormous size. However, there were still specimens that would terrify many people today. Let's take a closer look at these bugs. Paleodictyoptera were ancient dragonflies. No, the monstrous giants from the Carboniferous period, which we covered in a separate video, were long gone by the Lopingian Epoch. However, these insects didn't disappear entirely. While most Paleodictyoptera had gone extinct by the early Permian period, some of their close relatives survived into the Lopingian Epoch. These insects still had impressively large wings, spanning 30 to 40 centimeters. They lived near bodies of water and were predators, hunting other insects. Megaseccoptera were sharing the same ecological niche. These insects had long, narrow wings and a distinctive body shape, resembling large modern dragonflies. Their wingspans ranged from 20 to 30 centimeters. Another notable insect was Protocoleoptera, a primitive relative of modern beetles. They also lived during the Lopingian Epoch and were quite sizable by beetle standards. Reaching sizes of up to 7 centimeters, they likely lived in wooded areas or near bodies of water, feeding on decaying plant material. As formidable as the monsters of this epoch seemed, they too proved fragile and helpless over the long term. As terrifying as the Lopingian period was, its end was equally tragic. It concluded with the largest mass extinction Earth has ever known, the Permian-Triassic extinction event. Up to 95% of animal species vanished from the planet. This is the only mass extinction in history that affected even insects.